Imagine this. You are 73 years old. You have lived in the same house almost your entire life. 70 years in the same place. The same dirt road. The same hills. The same porch where mornings begin with quiet air and evenings end with familiar silence. Every board in the house remembers something. The walls remember voices that no longer live there. The kitchen remembers meals shared across decades. And the porch remembers the rhythm of life passing slowly on a rural road. For most of your life, the outside world barely noticed that house. Then suddenly, the outside world arrives. Cars appear where there were none before. Strangers slow down on the road. Phones come out. Cameras start recording. People whisper your name as if they already know you. And your home, once the center of a private life, begins to feel like a destination. That is the reality facing Betty Whittaker today. In 2026, the house near is no longer simply a place where family lived quietly for decades. It has become something else. A landmark, a curiosity, a stop along a road that strangers now travel deliberately. Some visitors arrive politely. They drive slowly past the house and leave. Others come closer. Some knock. Some film from the road. Some treat the place as if it were part of a documentary set rather than someone's home. For Betty Whittaker and Larry Whittaker, this constant attention has changed daily life in ways few people outside the situation fully understand. Larry reportedly said something simple when asked about the attention. "I don't go out. I don't talk to nobody. We just got tired of it." That sentence says more than it seems, because it reveals the quiet cost of unwanted attention. When a home becomes famous, privacy disappears. And when privacy disappears, something else often disappears with it. Freedom. The freedom to sit on your porch without wondering who might be watching. The freedom to walk down your driveway without being recorded. The freedom to live inside your own space without strangers turning it into a spectacle. The Whittaker house now sits about 75 miles south of Charleston, deep inside rural territory where the mountains and forests once provided natural privacy. But geography no longer guarantees invisibility. The internet erased that protection. Once the Whittaker story reached millions of viewers, the road to their home stopped being anonymous. And once a location becomes widely known, something predictable begins to happen. People start showing up. Some arrive with sympathy. Some arrive with curiosity. Some arrive with motives that are harder to understand. That is why a new question has begun circulating around the Whittaker story in 2026. Should Betty and Larry move? Not whether they can move. Not whether someone might offer to help them move. But whether moving has become necessary. Because leaving the house where you spent 70 years is not a simple decision. It is not just about finding a better building. It is about leaving the memories attached to every room. The conversations that happened on the porch. The routines that shaped everyday life. Moving would mean closing a chapter of history. But at the same time, staying carries risks. Risks created by attention. Risks created by strangers. And risks created by the complicated network of people who have become involved in the Whittaker story over the past few years. That is why the question of relocation is more complicated than it first appears. Moving does not simply change an address. It changes access. It changes influence. It changes who is allowed to step into the lives of Betty and Larry moving forward. Because once a family relocates, new dynamics begin forming. Old patterns dissipate. New people step forward. New decisions are made about who helps, who manages communication, and who becomes the voice representing them publicly. And that process can lead in two very different directions: protection or exploitation. The difference between those outcomes depends on something many viewers never consider: structure. Structure determines whether vulnerable people receive genuine support or become dependent on whoever speaks the loudest. Without structure, a move simply shifts the risk from one location to another. With structure, A move can create the conditions for safety and dignity. So in this investigation, we are going to examine 7 reasons why moving may no longer be optional for Betty and Larry Whittaker. Some of those reasons offer hope. Others reveal risks that few people have fully considered. And the final reason, reason 7, is the one that quietly determines whether relocation becomes protection or simply a new form of control. But before we explore those reasons, it is important to understand the environment surrounding the Whittaker home today. Because the house itself is part of a larger region shaped by geography, history, and economic struggle. Southern West Virginia sits within the ancient landscape of the Appalachian Mountains. Rolling ridges stretch across the horizon. Dense forests cover steep hillsides. Small communities appear between valleys and narrow roads. For generations, families built lives in these hills supported by industries like coal mining. But when the coal economy declined, many towns faced economic hardship. Jobs disappeared. Young people moved away. Infrastructure struggled to keep pace with changing conditions. The result is a region that remains breathtakingly beautiful while also carrying deep economic challenges. Communities like Odd exist inside that reality. Quiet, isolated, often misunderstood by outsiders who view Appalachia only through stereotypes rather than lived experience. For decades, that isolation protected the Whittaker family from national attention. But once their story reached the internet, that protection vanished. Now the road leading to their home carries a different kind of traffic. People searching, people filming, people curious about a family they first encountered through a screen. And with that curiosity comes a difficult reality. Betty and Larry can no longer live as privately as they once did. The house that once represented familiarity now represents exposure. Which brings us to the first reason many observers believe relocation may have become necessary. Privacy. Because in situations like this, privacy is not simply comfort. It is security. And when security begins to disappear, the question of moving becomes something much more serious than a simple change of address. The first reason people are now discussing whether Betty and Larry Whittaker should leave their home is simple. Privacy. But privacy in this situation is not about comfort. It is about safety. For most of their lives, the Whittaker property near Odd existed outside public attention. The road leading to their house was just another rural Appalachian road, quiet, narrow, and largely invisible to anyone who did not live nearby. That kind of invisibility is normal across many parts of West Virginia. Small communities scattered through the Appalachian Mountains often function quietly. People know their neighbors. Visitors are noticed quickly, and daily life moves at a slower pace than in cities. But once the Whittaker story reached the internet, that quiet geography changed. Suddenly, the road to their house was no longer anonymous. People began searching for the location online. Some viewers used maps to trace the area. Others watched videos filmed near the property and compared landmarks until they could identify the exact road. Within months, what had once been an ordinary home became something else. A destination. Cars began appearing more frequently. Sometimes visitors would drive slowly past the house, hoping to glimpse the family. Other times people would stop and film from the road. Some knocked on the door. Others remained outside, recording from a distance. For someone who spent 70 years living quietly in the same place, that kind of attention changes daily life in ways outsiders rarely understand. Imagine waking up each morning not knowing whether strangers will appear that day. Imagine sitting on your own porch and wondering whether someone down the road is filming. Imagine hearing a car slow down outside your house and wondering why it stopped. That is the difference between privacy and exposure. And once exposure begins, it rarely disappears on its own. This is why many observers believe relocation may eventually become necessary. Because a new address, if kept private, can remove the constant flow of strangers. No more people driving down the road searching for the house. No more unexpected visitors knocking on the door. No more cameras pointed toward the yard. In theory, moving could restore the quiet life that Betty and Larry once had. But privacy by itself does not solve every problem. In fact, privacy can sometimes create new risks. Because when vulnerable individuals disappear from public view entirely, another danger can emerge. Isolation. When attention drops suddenly, fewer people are checking on their well-being. Fewer outsiders notice if something goes wrong. And neglect, intentional or accidental, can occur quietly. This is the paradox of privacy. Too little privacy invites intrusion. Too much privacy can hide problems. The solution is balance. Privacy combined with structure. That structure might include regular welfare checks from trusted contacts, visits scheduled through reliable organizations, medical oversight, and clear communication channels with people responsible for their care. When privacy and structure exist together, safety improves. When privacy exists alone, vulnerability can grow. This leads to the second reason relocation may become necessary: breaking the control loop. The phrase control loop sounds technical, but the concept is simple. In many situations involving vulnerable individuals, one person gradually becomes the gatekeeper. That person may begin with good intentions. They might say things like, "I'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry. I'll handle the visitors. I'll manage the donations." Over time, that single individual becomes the center of all decisions. They control access. They control communication. And eventually they control the narrative. Who gets to visit? Who is allowed to help? What the public hears about the situation. This type of power does not always look abusive. Sometimes it looks helpful. But concentrated authority around vulnerable individuals creates a dangerous imbalance. If the gatekeeper makes poor decisions or begins acting in their own interest, there are few safeguards. Relocating can disrupt that dynamic. When a family moves, the old system collapses. The familiar routes dissipate. The established access points disappear. And the narrative that one person controls everything becomes harder to maintain. In theory, relocation forces a reset. Old patterns vanish. New structures must be built. And new oversight can be introduced. But relocation also creates another risk. Breaking one control loop can accidentally create another. If everyone else steps back after the move and one person becomes responsible for managing the new situation, the same problem returns in a different form. A new gatekeeper, a new narrative, the same vulnerability. This is why experts who work with vulnerable adults often emphasize shared oversight. Multiple people involved. Multiple contacts responsible for checking in. No single person holding complete authority. Because the moment one individual becomes the only voice speaking for someone else, the possibility of exploitation increases. Relocation can break an unhealthy pattern, but it must be followed by a system that prevents the same pattern from reappearing. Otherwise, the move simply transfers control from one environment to another. So the first two reasons for relocation are deeply connected. Privacy protects against unwanted intrusion. Breaking the control loop protects against concentrated power. But both require something larger than the move itself. Structure. Without structure, a move changes location but not vulnerability. With structure, a move can create the conditions for safety and dignity. For Betty and Larry Whittaker, that distinction may determine whether relocation becomes protection or merely a different form of risk. The third reason many observers believe Betty and Larry Whittaker may eventually have to leave their longtime home is more practical than emotional. Housing safety. When people talk about moving, the conversation often focuses on comfort. A nicer house, a newer building, a quieter location. But in situations involving elderly residents, Housing is not primarily about comfort. It is about risk. Over time, homes age just like the people who live inside them. Electrical systems weaken. Gas lines deteriorate. Floors become unstable. Appliances break down. Small problems accumulate slowly until they begin creating real danger. Investigations and reporting surrounding the Whitaker property in late 2025 raised concerns about several conditions inside the house. Reports described issues such as gas leaks from the stove, unsanitary kitchen surfaces, and structural deterioration that had gone unrepaired for years. Those problems may not sound dramatic on their own, but combined with age and health limitations, they can become life-threatening. Gas leaks increase the risk of fire or poisoning. Unsanitary food storage increases the risk of illness. Weak flooring or unstable steps increase the risk of falls. For someone in their 70s, a fall inside the home is not a minor event. It can mean broken bones, hospitalization, loss of independence. In some cases, it can even become fatal. That is why housing safety becomes critical as people age. A secure environment includes stable flooring, reliable appliances, working plumbing, and proper ventilation. It also includes the ability to install medical equipment if needed, things like mobility supports, emergency alert systems, or specialized beds. Many older homes were never designed for those needs. And in rural areas like southern West Virginia, access to repair services can be limited. Contractors may live hours away. Replacement parts take longer to arrive, and routine maintenance can easily fall behind. Relocating to a newer or renovated home could eliminate many of those risks. Reliable utilities, safe food storage, proper heating and ventilation, and a structure designed to support aging residents. In that sense, moving is not about luxury. It is about survivability. But housing improvements bring their own complications. Because once a vulnerable household moves into a visibly improved environment, attention can increase rather than decrease. A new house may signal something to outsiders: support, resources, donations. And when people believe money is flowing into a situation, opportunists sometimes appear. Offers of assistance, offers to manage repairs, offers to coordinate fundraising. Each offer may appear generous, but without transparency, help can easily become a pathway to exploitation. This is why housing improvements must be accompanied by strict financial oversight, clear records, receipts, independent verification, and clear rules about who is allowed to manage funds or make decisions about the property. Without that transparency, even a safe home can become the center of financial manipulation, which leads to the fourth reason relocation forces an important conversation: legal clarity. Many people discussing the Whittaker story online ask the same question without realizing it. Who is legally responsible for Betty and Larry? In everyday life, that question rarely arises. Families care for one another informally. Neighbors help when needed. Decisions are made through conversation rather than paperwork. But when vulnerable adults become part of a widely publicized situation, legal responsibility becomes essential. Who has the authority to approve medical treatment? Who is allowed to manage financial matters? Who can speak to doctors, social workers, or service providers? Who is authorized to approve visitors? Without clear answers to those questions, confusion emerges. And confusion creates opportunities for manipulation. Someone might claim they are in charge. Another person might believe they hold that responsibility. A third individual might step forward claiming to represent the family publicly. When multiple people believe they have authority, the situation becomes chaotic. Predators thrive in that chaos, because unclear authority allows them to insert themselves into decisions that should belong to someone else. Relocating provides an opportunity to clarify these roles. If Betty and Larry move, legal documentation, must define responsibility clearly. That might include power of attorney arrangements, medical decision-making authority, financial management oversight, or the involvement of social services professionals who monitor the situation regularly. Clarity prevents misunderstandings. It also prevents individuals from claiming authority they do not legally possess. Without that clarity, every decision becomes vulnerable to dispute. Who approved the expense? Who authorized the visitor? Who decided which donations to accept? Each unanswered question becomes a potential entry point for conflict or exploitation. This is particularly important in situations where public attention has already created financial activity. Donations, support funds, offers of assistance. Without legal structure, money can flow through informal channels that are difficult to track. Relocation forces the conversation about accountability. Who manages funds? Who monitors care? Who verifies that promises are being kept? And who has the legal standing to act on behalf of the individuals involved? For Betty and Larry Whittaker, those questions may determine whether relocation improves their lives or simply moves their vulnerabilities to a new location. Because a new house alone does not create safety. Legal clarity does. Together, housing safety and legal responsibility form the foundation of any successful relocation. One protects physical well-being. The other protects decision-making authority. Without both, a move simply rearranges the risks rather than eliminating them. The fifth reason relocation may eventually become necessary has nothing to do with houses or attention. It has to do with geography. Where people live determines how quickly help can reach them. And in rural Appalachia, distance can quietly decide outcomes. The Whitaker home sits deep within the hills of southern West Virginia, not far from the small community of Odd. Like many homes scattered across the Appalachian Mountains, the property is surrounded by narrow roads, steep terrain, and long distances between services. For younger residents, that isolation can feel peaceful. For elderly residents, it can become dangerous. Emergency response times in rural areas are often significantly longer than in cities. Ambulances must travel farther. Hospitals are located many miles away, and specialized medical services may require even longer trips. A medical emergency that might receive treatment within minutes in a city could take far longer in remote terrain. For individuals in their 70s, those minutes matter. Heart attacks, falls, respiratory distress. In many cases, the difference between recovery and tragedy is measured in response time. Relocating closer to a regional center such as Beckley or Charleston could dramatically improve access to healthcare. Hospitals within 15 minutes instead of 4 to 5. Pharmacies nearby instead of miles away. Home health aides able to visit regularly. Emergency services arriving faster when needed. Those improvements do not guarantee safety, but they significantly reduce risk. However, relocation also disrupts routines that elderly individuals often depend on. Familiar schedules, known environments, trusted patterns of daily life. Even positive changes can cause stress. Sleep patterns may shift. Medication schedules can be interrupted. The emotional impact of leaving a lifelong home can affect mental health. That is why relocation planning must include transition support. Medical care must continue without interruption. Medication schedules must remain consistent. Basic supplies must be available on the first day in the new location. Without careful planning, even a beneficial move can create a temporary period of vulnerability. This leads directly into the sixth reason relocation creates unexpected challenges. The Internet. Because the moment news spreads that Betty and Larry Whittaker have moved, something predictable will happen. Online attention will surge again. Within hours of the announcement, new posts will appear. Speculation will spread. People will begin searching for clues about the new location. Some viewers will simply express concern, but others may see opportunity. Fake fundraising campaigns can appear quickly online. Individuals claiming to represent the Whitakers may attempt to collect donations. People may claim insider access or exclusive knowledge. This pattern has appeared repeatedly in viral stories involving vulnerable families. Confusion creates opportunity. When the public does not know where someone is living or who is responsible for helping them, opportunists sometimes fill that vacuum. The Whittaker name has already proven capable of attracting financial attention. Previous fundraising efforts associated with the family generated large amounts of money. And when money becomes connected to a widely discussed story, the possibility of fraud increases. Protecting Betty and Larry from that kind of exploitation requires clear communication. Only verified channels should provide updates about their situation. Any fundraising campaigns must be publicly documented and transparent. And the most important rule must remain clear. No one should attempt to locate the family's new address. Because once a location becomes widely known online, the cycle of intrusion begins again. Privacy is the only barrier that prevents strangers from appearing at the door. And privacy disappears the moment people begin searching for the address. But the internet introduces another challenge beyond fraud: narrative control. In viral stories, the person who posts the most updates often becomes the voice representing the situation. That person may not have legal authority. They may not have direct involvement. But their constant presence online allows them to shape how the public understands events. If relocation occurs without clear communication rules, multiple individuals may begin presenting themselves as spokespeople, each offering different information, each attracting supporters, each potentially controlling parts of the narrative. Which brings us to the final and most overlooked reason relocation must be handled carefully: the vacuum problem. When a household relocates, the previous system of relationships collapses. Old routines disappear. Old access points vanish. Old gatekeepers lose influence. At first glance, that collapse appears positive, because it breaks patterns that may have allowed exploitation to occur. But the moment the old system disappears, a vacuum forms. And vacuums rarely remain empty for long. Someone eventually steps into the open space. The person who speaks the loudest. The person who organizes donations. The person who claims to manage communication. That individual gradually becomes the new center of authority. If that person is trustworthy, the system stabilizes. If that person is not trustworthy, exploitation returns under a different name. This is why the first 90 days after relocation are often the most critical period. During those 3 months, new patterns form. Relationships reorganize. Control structures emerge. Financial systems take shape. If oversight is not present during that period, the wrong individual can quietly become the new gatekeeper. Preventing that outcome requires something simple but powerful: multiple layers of accountability. No single person controlling access. No single person managing finances. No single person speaking on behalf of the family. Instead, responsibility must be shared among several trusted contacts: family members, social services professionals, independent observers who verify that decisions remain transparent. Financial records must remain open. Donations must be tracked. Communication channels must be verified. And the family's location must remain private. Because relocation alone does not create protection. Protection comes from structure, from shared oversight, from systems designed to prevent any single individual from controlling everything. Without those safeguards, moving simply replaces one vulnerable situation with another. By now the question has changed. At the beginning, the debate sounded simple. Should Betty and Larry Whittaker move? But after looking closely at the realities surrounding their situation, the question becomes more precise. What actually protects them? Because relocation alone is not protection. Moving to a new house does not automatically create safety. A different address does not erase the risks that already exist. And distance from odd does not automatically guarantee a better outcome. Protection comes from structure, and that structure must exist the moment the move happens. If Betty and Larry relocate without a plan, several things happen immediately. Old routines disappear. Old neighbors who quietly checked on them may no longer be nearby. Familiar surroundings vanish overnight. And during that moment of transition, uncertainty grows. Uncertainty about who manages daily care. Uncertainty about who handles finances. Uncertainty about who speaks for them publicly. Whenever uncertainty appears around vulnerable people, someone eventually steps forward to fill the gap. Sometimes that person is trustworthy. Sometimes that person is not. That is why the first weeks after relocation matter more than the move itself. Because this is the moment when influence reorganizes. Who controls access? Who controls information? Who controls money? Who decides which visitors are allowed inside? If the answers to those questions remain unclear, exploitation can quietly reappear under a new form. A different house does not automatically change human behavior, but clear oversight can. The strongest protection for Betty and Larry would involve several safeguards working together. First, privacy must be respected. Their new address should not become public knowledge. The moment strangers begin searching for their location, the same cycle that surrounded their previous home begins again. Cars driving down unfamiliar roads. People knocking on doors. Visitors appearing uninvited with cameras. Privacy is not secrecy. It is protection. Second, responsibility must be shared. No single individual should control access to the Whitakers. When only one person decides who visits, who receives updates, or who handles donations, that individual becomes a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers hold enormous power. Shared oversight prevents that concentration of authority. Family members, professional caregivers, social workers, multiple individuals who can verify that decisions remain transparent. Third, finances must remain visible. If donations or support funds are collected, every dollar must be documented. Receipts, records, independent verification. Not because generosity is suspicious, but because transparency prevents abuse. History has shown repeatedly that financial secrecy creates opportunities for exploitation. Clarity eliminates those opportunities. Fourth, care services must remain consistent. Relocation should not interrupt access to medication, medical appointments, or assistance with daily tasks. If the move places Betty and Larry closer to hospitals and pharmacies, that improvement must translate into real care. Regular check-ins, scheduled visits from professionals, reliable support that does not depend entirely on informal help. Because aging does not pause during a move, and small health problems become large ones when care is delayed. Finally, communication must remain responsible. Public interest in the Whittaker story has grown far beyond the small roads of West Virginia. Millions of people have watched their lives unfold online. Some viewers care deeply about their well-being. Others simply follow the story out of curiosity. But responsible communication requires boundaries. Updates should come from verified sources. Speculation about their location or private lives should stop. And supporters who genuinely want to help must recognize that the most respectful form of support is distance. Sometimes protecting someone means stepping back. For decades, Betty and Larry Whittaker lived in the same home. The porch, the yard, the familiar roads winding through the hills. That house witnessed almost their entire lives. Leaving it would not simply mean changing buildings. It would mean leaving behind 70 years of memory. And that kind of transition carries emotional weight that outsiders rarely fully understand. The decision to move, if it happens, will not be easy, But the real outcome of that decision will depend less on the house itself and more on the system built around it. A safe home, transparent oversight, shared responsibility, respect for privacy. Those elements together create protection. Without them, relocation changes only the scenery. With them, relocation can create the stability that Betty and Larry deserve in this stage of their lives. And that is the final truth behind the question everyone keeps asking. Moving might help. Moving might reduce risks. Moving might restore a sense of peace that has been lost in recent years. But safety does not come from an address. Safety comes from people choosing accountability, transparency, and respect. If those principles guide whatever happens next, the Whitakers will have something far more valuable than a new house. They will have the quiet dignity of a life no longer treated as a spectacle. And after everything their story has endured, that may be the protection that matters most. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.